What is up, my fellow brain bleeds? Welcome back to the channel, scab scratchers. Losers! Attention, military men! It's time that we get personal. I talk about a lot of things on this channel, but the one thing that ties all of my video essays together is that I only make them on topics that I'm very passionate about. And I do that because, first and foremost, I want my passion and love for a topic to shine through. If I had to guess, my biggest fear when it comes to releasing a video is that the general consensus is going to be, this video is derivative. That my passion for an experience isn't worth listening to because it's too similar to what's been said before. No, sir, that would sting and break my heart into 150,000 pieces. It's why, despite the channel still being relatively small, I get so much out of the few people watching and commenting on every video. Whether a project nets a lot of views or gets me a significant amount of subscribers, I want the people that watch to be entertained first and foremost. I'll kiss you all one day. Just wait until you see my Hatsune Miku cosplay at the next expo. But this is why, when I make long-form videos, I make absolutely sure that I have something unique to say. I take the topic down a different road than, I played this game, review. I try to make a case for why certain aspects of the game make it better, bog it down, or just make me appreciate it as much as I do. Essentially, I'm trying to further the conversation. That's why, despite my first really successful video having been on the Star Ocean series, and knowing that a ton of my subscribers are here because of that series, I've yet to talk about it at length. The deepest I've gone into any individual game is a couple sentences for a series recap, or talking about a remake that's not even out yet. What do I say? Like, seriously, what aspect of each game do I focus on? The skill systems, till the end of time story, integrity and faithlessness? What does that even mean? Despite this though, I've wanted to cover this series because more so than any other of my niche interests, Star Ocean does not get the respect that it deserves. Far too much of the online discourse is made up of judging Star Ocean 5 as garbage at a glance, old heads complaining about how nothing compares to the second story, Star Ocean 4 and its air quotes insufferable voice acting even though many of the annoying voices have the exact same inflection in Japanese, or judging Star Ocean 5 as garbage at a glance after playing it for 20 minutes. Alright, I'll give you a shot. I don't agree with any of that. And while, yes, that's obviously a simplification of things, so rarely is this series analyzed from an angle that does justice to how huge each of these games actually are. So that is my goal. I've loved this franchise my whole life, and now is the time to snap them apart and slurp up all the meat that's inside. Ew. I want to take in everything these games have to offer, mix both my old and new opinions into a commentary that serves to explain why I, and so many other unheard individuals, vehemently stand by this franchise. And thus, my mind began to move. And immediately derailed at the first station. This is gonna be a big one. Well, real quick history lesson, alright? Come on down to Ham's History. Hell. Star Ocean is a JRPG franchise developed by Tri-Ace and has been running strong for over 2 decades. Despite the ups and downs of its critical reception, it's remained prevalent in Japan, and its most recent entry was 2022's Star Ocean: The Divine Force. The two most commonly beloved games are the second story and Till the End of Time on the PlayStation 1 and 2 respectively. The adventures are a mix of sci-fi and fantasy. They all exist in the same timeline, and in most cases sport light to heavy party customization. It is hands down my favorite JRPG franchise, beating out Final Fantasy, Tales of, Xenoblade, everything. Mic drop. Now I'm gonna pick it back up and keep speaking. Alright, so this is my ranking for all the Star Ocean games pre-video series, 514623. But regardless of placement, I struggled to come up with anything to say about Star Ocean First Departure for the longest time, and I believe this is due to 2 different reasons. First off, as a person who was introduced to the series with 2, fun fact, check out this statistic. First Departure was a game I wanted to play because it was more Star Ocean 2. In reality though, First Departure is a 2008 PSP remake of the original entry from the Super Famicom, taking that untranslated classic and molding it into something far more similar to the second story. This version was then lightly touched up and released on the PSN and Switch Digital
original storefronts. At first glance, this remake is nearly unrecognizable from its original state, but despite this, it's still the first Star Ocean. Same story, same characters, with many complexities of the second story still not being present. Now, the original Star Ocean is indeed very similar to its successor, but First Departure never hid its intentions of tossing away many design philosophies of its source material in favor for what the most beloved entry did. This is all to say that while it has its own identity, it kind of feels like a retro Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom situation, where both have their unique flares, but one is very much a beefier version of the other. Most praise I can give to Star Ocean 1 can also be applied to 2, so what do I focus on to justify actually making a video on it? The second big reason I struggled for so long with what to say is that despite the fact that I know I love this game, I could never quite identify why. This was my third playthrough. Most games, I don't play more than once. It's not a long game, so it is easy to replay, but then again, so is 2. Why don't I play that again? Why don't I go play the Final Fantasy VII Remake again? Heck, Star Ocean 4 or 5?
What about First Departure makes it so easy for me to thoroughly enjoy it, but be left with almost nothing to say? I was worried that this third playthrough would leave my head barren, those thoughts left scrambled.
After about 5 hours into my playthrough for this video, it suddenly clicked. All at once, I began to piece together why I love First Departure, despite its confused identity in the eyes of many, including me. It was a realization that I've never seen a single soul try to explain, heck, even touch upon. But after 3 playthroughs, experiencing nearly all of the movesets, dozens of private actions, and tons of optional dungeons and item creation systems, I've realized that I had been viewing this game as a second story light, not its own independent title, and in the process doing myself a disservice, because the truth is, there is no game like Star Ocean First Departure. It is, in its own twisted, ingenious manner, entirely unique. This realization took me to godhood status. Despite on the surface this remake aiming to strip away many of the source material's unique attributes in favor of playing like a different game, so much of the original Super Famicom Star Ocean still lives and breathes here. And after diving into everything it has to offer, it is very much a unique experience. It treats its subsystems very differently, handles character recruitment in a far less rigid manner than its successors, presents a vast majority of its runtime as approachable from different angles. Each Star Ocean game presents an entirely unique experience, for better or worse depending on who you ask, and First Departure is no exception. And strangely enough, I think understanding this game's shortcomings both inside and outside of its series makes me appreciate it even more. So no more ballin' TF out, ladies and gents, overlords and underlings. It's time for me to make my case as to why I love Star Ocean First Departure. It's time to have a stroke.
Hey everybody, how you doing tonight? Hello? Okay, this isn't on. I've prepared a poem for you all tonight. This one's for the plebeians out there. Ones I call friends. Alright? Okay. Don't play Star Ocean. You'll definitely hate it. Play Xenoblade instead. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Now, before I head out tonight, I actually have a few reasons on why you should.
Star Ocean First Departure follows Roddick, a young boy who's part of the defense force of his hometown Kratos, alongside his childhood friends Millie and Dorn, who is single-handedly the most powerful character in video game history sans, well, what was his name again? They spend their quiet days slacking off and shooting the breeze. However, Roddick expresses a distaste for his quiet life, silently longing for something more. Unfortunately, his prayers are answered in a less than ideal manner when a plague strikes the town of Kuhl and Millie's father goes to treat the sick, catching the disease himself. This mysterious disease rapidly turns the host's body to stone, and the three secretly head to the peak of Mount Matorx in hopes of picking a powerful herb. On the way, Dorn collapses, revealing that he's caught the disease off of a carrier pigeon. However, this is actually the least surprising reveal this side of 10 seconds, because upon reaching the peak, their path is cut off by two strangely dressed, tailless people who are beamed down from the sky. Introducing themselves as Ronix J. Kenny and Elias Silvestri, they inform our heroes that the herbs will be entirely ineffective, giving them the option of beaming back up to their spaceship so Dorn can receive treatment and hopefully formulate a cure. However, the trade-off is that Roddick and the gang will never be able to return home. You see, this has just been Star Trek the whole time, and I've been tricking you guys so hard. Ronix and Elia are part of the Earth Space Federation, or ESF, and letting Ronix and the gang return home after prolonged contact with such an advanced spacefaring society would be a breach of the Underdeveloped Planet Preservation Pact, or UP3. Try saying that 3 times. See, this mysterious virus is actually a bioweapon that's been shot at the planet Roke, and they believe the Lizonian civilization to be the ones responsible. After all, they're easy scapegoats due to their previous conflicts. Quickly finding the virus to be a mutating mess, the doctors inform Roddick, Ronix, and the rest, the RR&R, if you were to feel so heinously inclined, that the only way they can create a vaccine is to have Patient Zero's DNA. The Lizonians make a sudden and invisible entrance alongside the gang ship and inform the ESF that the weapon was in fact fired on Roke by a hidden third party that had been pulling the strings throughout their previous conflicts, theorizing that the bodies are being used to create some kind of invisibility technology, a byproduct of Rokian's copper-based blood. Sure. When Ronix requests the DNA of Patient Zero, they're told that the original host of the petrification virus was the legendary demon king Asmodeus, who existed on Roke 300 years in the past. Disheartened by this news, Ronix decides a court-martial is a small price to pay for saving the lives of an entire planet. They return Dorn's body to Roke's surface, and they head to the sealed-away world of planet Styx, which they believe to have been inhabited by a highly advanced civilization far before Earth ever reached space. On planet Styx rests the Time Gate, a sentient portal that will grant the ability to time travel to those it deems worthy. Our 4 brave heroes then set off on a worldwide journey to restore the 4 crystals. Our heroes all jump through the time gate onto Roke of 300 years past, with Roddick and Elia waking up in a tiny town, Ronix and Millie nowhere to be seen. Fade to black. That was the first hour of Star Ocean 1. From here, the game plays out as you might expect.
You jump from town to town, searching for your companions, eventually finding them, and continuing your search for Asmodeus. You'll meet colorful characters, visit tons of different dungeons, level up, listen to a good soundtrack, and overall experience what is, on the surface, a very serviceable retro JRPG. Those are the keywords, though, right? On the surface. On the surface, this game's fun. The combat is snappy, the vibes are cool, voice acting is serviceable, the plot takes you to some real fun places, there are item creation systems and different recruitable characters to goof around with. However, I don't love games that are just fun, especially when on the surface, the game is also ugly, slow to become challenging, occasionally buggy, full with lots of backtracking, a subpar world map, and characters which lack immediately compelling hooks. But something I'm beginning to understand is if you look at any Star Ocean game and judge it at surface value, you'll probably walk away with a less than stellar experience. Throughout every generation, there has been a Tales of game, a Final Fantasy, or Kingdom Hearts, some other JRPG that is immediately easier to click with and will demand far less than what a given console Star Ocean will ask of you. It's why despite my constant praise heaped onto the series, I don't recommend my friends check it out until they're more versed in the JRPG genre. If you take in all of what a title has to offer, the item creation systems, learning efficient combo strings, and ideal party composition, which special moves reward you with the best frame data, which stats to buff, and which openly presented exploits to push, you end up with titles that rise far above what their genre tends to offer. This level of depth and detail also tends to bleed over into the world and stories that the games tell, not just the gameplay. And I finally come to understand that this idea, this philosophy is absolutely present in First Departure, despite my dopey little I haven't taken 3 playthroughs to notice. So let's unpack some of the ways this game soars so above and beyond what its seemingly simple gameplay and story should allow for.
Let's jump back to where we were. This is a really good opening act for a handful of reasons, one being the manner in which the game imbues its world with charm. Back home in the town of Kratos, you can have tiny little conversations with all the townsfolk, all of which know each other and speak of daily affairs as if it's common knowledge. This grounds the characters in the world and really makes the small town feel lived in, like Roddick, Millie, and Dorn are all functional pieces of the puzzle. Their interactions with the residents of the spaceship are also cute, because while a standard fish-out-of-water affair, Millie, being the religious symbology user, would probably think that Ilia and Ronix are gods. Roddick, being the well-meaning but curious young man, would most certainly ask if it's hard to walk without a tail. The simplest things impress our trio, and once you're down on past Roke, many simple things impress Ilia and Ronix. The dynamics between the characters and their opposing settings is a great simple form of entertainment. They did a great job in this first act of establishing how the whole series was to go about merging science fiction and fantasy worlds into one cohesive whole. It isn't just the character interactions though, it's all of the smaller things too. The NPCs with strange, quirky dialogue, yet not frequent enough to become grating. The stun sprites where everyone just goes, It's the delicate and unique layouts of towns that make every settlement feel unique and lively in different ways. All of the dumb and humorous item descriptions. It's a charming game through and through. One where the developers made it a point to instill creative passion into the minute details that many choose to skip over. Its depth and detail you have to go search for, not readily evident on the surface. I love that. Also, I can't be the only one that freaking loves the actual setup to the main plot, deceptively simple as it may be. So, what's the actual goal here? You may say to save the world from the Demon King Asmodeus, and while yes, you do that, that's only a byproduct of the party's actual goal, which is to sample his DNA to save the world of their time. Why do they have to rush their goal? Well, it's to save Dorn and everyone else as soon as possible. No, actually, the petrification virus leaves the victims' bodies entirely intact. They have to find Asmodeus as soon as possible because the third party is also on Roke of 300 years past, aiming to get their hands on the virus, which they will later use on Roke of the present day. Those homies can stay straight up posted for all I care. While the things you do and the ways you achieve them tend to be standard fantasy and sci-fi fare, your reasons for doing so and the circumstances under which they're necessary are far more interesting than just to stop the demon horde and save the world. This also creates a really interesting separation in between the 4 party members of present day and the 4 you'll choose to recruit from 300 years in the past. They have no idea that Rodix, Millie, and the rest are from the future, or why they're actually tracking down Asmodeus in the first place. You know, the Demon King who exists in the demon world. So for characters like Ashley, Faya, Yoshua, when things start to get dicey near the end of the story's time on past Roke and you're uncovering ancient ruins and traveling to highly advanced facilities, they would have no clue what's happening because the folks from the future chose not to fill them in. This makes their dedication to helping Roddick during the last act all the more touching because they realistically have no stake in what's going on, but we helped them save their world, and now they're gonna help us. That's all I'm gonna speak on in regards to the story, so if you've been worried about spoilers, you're straight up bugging for real. I'm actually gonna hop over to another specific thing I love about First Departure, which is the character recruitment.
I believe that out of all of these Star Ocean games, specifically the First Departure, right, not the Super Famicom version, does this best.
Each Star Ocean game post 3 has heavily stripped back the ability to customize your party, and I kinda like that they did. Primarily because in the first 2 games, only a handful of characters can consistently contribute to the plot, because it has to be written in such a manner that accommodates for most of the playable cast potentially not being present. Heck, only 2 characters are required in the second story, so characters like Celine or Pressus or Bowman don't really contribute too much past a certain point. I don't know about y'all, but I really cared about Noel's arc. I renamed him Sussy in my playthrough, and I have no recollection of that. This is not a problem in a game like the Divine Force, where 8 of the 10 characters are always present. First Departure forces 4 into your party, which I feel is a good balance between player choice and having a large enough cast to service your plot. Throughout the story, you'll be introduced to a ton of characters which you'll have the chance to recruit. 13 in total, not including Dorn. They nerfed him to bottom tier, so that leaves 4 slots for you to fill at your leisure, and depending on who you recruit and when, that will in turn affect which other characters are recruitable and when. For example, if you recruit the first optional member Cius, you won't be able to get Ashley, and getting Ashley opens up the chance to get Eris way down the line if you also choose to snag Yoshua. Passing up on Cius and Ashley will allow you to recruit Faya much earlier than normal, albeit her late game strength won't be as impactful. There's a quest around the halfway point that requires you to travel back to all of the kingdoms of the world one more time, and around this point is when many optional characters are made available. If you're running around with 6 or less, you can go to the arena to recruit Tanika, like Lycanthropy Bowstaff user. Now, I tried to do this, but recruited Millie before I should, and I just cried and melted my PSP copy and drank it. If you just need one more character to fill up your roster, why not go and find Welch, inventing things in the middle of nowhere? Or travel back to the first town and find Perichi, also netting you the future ability to quickly dash around the world map on a fluffy bunny. This game is so much better than that stinky Dark Souls. More like Dark Suck, am I right, shit ass? This joke has been on my list for 3 years, alright, bear with me.
Being my 3rd playthrough, I aimed to recruit the rest of the characters I never had prior. Let's discuss all of them in the form of a tier list.
Starting out, you got Roddick, who is unarguably the strongest character in the game. His base combo is snappy and has a long reach, and while many of his early killer moves are actually kind of terrible, that's something which is consistent throughout the whole cast, and his early game access to strong weapons kind of makes up for it. In the second half of this adventure, you begin to find technique books, which can boost your existing killer moves into stronger, more flashy variants. And Roddick gets some psycho ones, like Omega Light Ray Blade, Phoenix Blast, Black Worm Thunder Surge. And his final progression-based attack, Dragon Roar, is not only one which reappears in Star Ocean 2, because it's sick, it stays consistently powerful through the end of the adventure. I think Roddick as a character is a totally serviceable protagonist from a story perspective. The fact that he's from the fantasy side of things does mean that he loses some plot relevance to Roddick for chunks of time, but that's something I plan to cover in full later on in the series. I like Roddick. He'd be bugging. SS tier in a class by himself. The next character to properly join is Ilya, who learns a whopping 4 skills without technique books. Her attacks all pop off really fast though, and her late game killer moves are all really strong. Her defense may be on the lower end, but she's still worthy of a forced character slot. I then proceeded to pass up on CS and recruit Ashley, who is undeniably the worst of the 3 sword users. One weird thing this game does is that CS and Ashley's movesets are 90% Radix attacked, but their base combo frame data is scuffed, with Ashley's in particular having a really long gap in between the second and third strike. Street Fighter reference? Ashley is a liability against large hordes, and there are a lot of those in First Departure. He is banished to bottom tier. After this, I snagged Yoshida, who serves his purpose for a time, but it's one I don't find to be too helpful. He learns some good offensive spells, but lacks any of the impactful support and healing spells. He's helpful in the rare occasions you need to run 3 fighters, but most of the time you're better off running a dedicated healer and attack mage for interrupting enemies. He's what the youngins like to call mid. Soon after, I recruited Ronix and Mavel. Ronix is your dedicated offensive spellcaster and serves that role entirely fine. Magic in the early Star Ocean games isn't ideal for big damage on certain enemies, instead popping off screen-wide nukes that buffer enemies' movement and leaves them open for combos. I use Ronix consistently in every playthrough. A. Mavel was never once sent out to fight. She's a good attacker, but I knew she would be booted later on in the playthrough, so I didn't bother wasting time. Joining later than my previous playthroughs was Millie at level 40 and knowing all but like 4 of her spells. I guess this is a good time to bring it up. You don't recruit any magic users under level 20, and by the time you start to get them, a bunch of their spells are already entirely irrelevant. Why give them to you then? It kind of feels like maybe that wasn't the intent, and that the lack of early game magic users was a byproduct of the original game's rushed development. Heck, a bunch of stuff didn't make any sense in the original game. You couldn't remove Roddick from your party, but they didn't give him an AI? Alright, military men, it's time to go to war. If you're not given direct orders, stand still in the line of fire and immediately die. Oops. Anyway, Millie is your dedicated healer, knows like 1 or 2 attacks, but that really isn't her focus. She works. She cute. A. It was at this point that I tried to recruit Tanique and didn't realize that I should have done that before getting Millie. Oopsie daisy! I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that he's racist. In his place, I recruited Welch, which was nice because in my first playthrough, I didn't get her until way after she was decidedly underleveled. Turns out she's alright. Most of her base moves are either simple combo extensions or gimmicky bullshit, but the fact she fights with a pointer stick kinda makes up for it. Her technique book skills are mostly simple combo extensions or gimmicky bullshit, but the fact she fights with a pointer stick kinda makes up for it. She isn't super high damage, but her screen-wide ground slam ended up being pretty useful. I'll put her in B. The fact she fights with a pointer stick kinda makes up for it. Eris is an interesting case, easily being the most difficult character to recruit, requiring 2 others to be present. Like Welch, she didn't exist in the original Super Famicom game, so they took the chance to backport some of Star Ocean 2's spells within her moveset. Lunar Light is solid, Southern Cross is cool, but she also learns the best healing spells, so her existing pretty much entirely nullifies Joshua, which is kind of an issue because he can't get her without him. Eris is very strong, and the ideal pick for running 3-fighter lineups. However, I still prefer to use 2 separate magic users so healing and attacking is more reliable. I'll put her at the bottom of A, simply for the novelty of finally having recruited her. Overall, First Departure has far from my favorite cast of character movesets. A lot of spells are shared, CS and Ashley barely count as unique characters, and the optional non-sword damage dealers tend to be rather quirky and arguably less effective as a result. However, the technique book system, giving characters interesting, super powerful upgrades to their existing skills as the game progresses, gives you a reason to explore each dungeon and inevitably provides at least 1 effective attack to each moveset. Each subsequent game handles character progression very differently, and I wouldn't say that this first rendition is my favorite, but it does allow for an interesting relationship between the gameplay and the story, where certain characters being present allows for different skills to be learned. Ashley can teach Roddick his 3 strongest attacks if recruited through a set of private actions. Some spells can be missed if you don't explore thoroughly. Nibbalungalung. Injected into my veins, I live for the grape lady. Punchy combat and flashy moves kind of define Star Ocean. It is absolutely present here. Now, Star Ocean games come in many different shapes and sizes, but the one thing that connects all of them together
Not you, Motoy.
The big thing that exists to some capacity in every mainline game is a fairly expansive item creation system, allowing you access to strong equipment, superior restoratives, random crap like character portraits, forging checks that will probably just make you lose money. The specialty system is present in the first 2 games as well, allowing you to perform actions like musical acts, foraging for items, lowering the encounter rate, which I swear to the Lord above triples it. However, while these subsystems exist in other games, and until the end of time and the last hope of a lot of intricacies like capitalism, the only game that really feels as if it's designed around the expectation to use them is First Departure. Near the end of the adventure, weapon drops begin to become really inconsistent. You might get a sword but no gloves, or a pair of gloves but the only pointer stick for sale is woefully weak by comparison. Then eventually you're given a meta-obliterating sword, so why bother using anyone other than Roddick? Now granted, I think about that question a lot, but that actually does pose a genuine problem because a comparable pair of gloves for Iliar, set of knives for Faya aren't going to be made readily available. That is, unless if you know how to get the most out of the item creation system to craft a god tier set of gloves or a really strong rod or solid accessories for stat buffs and all that chumble spuzz. I don't know, just the fact the game is confident enough in its subsystems to essentially knowledge check the player is neat, and on an off day, perhaps it brings a chuckle to my constitution. The most impressive part is that the concepts and different forms of item creation and the music specialty in particular are properly and thoroughly introduced, with different towns throughout the world being themed not only around the 4 seasons, but art, smithing, music, with all of the different tools being available to buy. You're then given complete free reign in the endgame, with a shop that sells anything you could possibly need to get the most out of your loadout and skills. First Departure expects you to engage with these systems, and makes it a point to introduce them to the player. If the game had simply left you in the dark, never explaining what it expected of you, that would have been really bad, considering that this is indeed the first game in the franchise. But if you ignore item creation, that's entirely on you. Be a smart guy. Be a smart fella. Better luck next time, ham for brains!
As of writing this, my arms are extremely tired, and I don't care enough to find an intelligent transition into talking about the dungeons, so instead here's a Family Guy cutaway. What the hell?
All the away!
The dungeons to Star Ocean First Departure, while not my favorite in the franchise, present a set of interesting, dynamic, and varied challenges that feel notably distinct from each other. I'm reading off the paper because my brain's not working too well. Let's do some rapid fire. Very slowly.
The Pirate's Cave is a good first dungeon, not too long or short, posing a decent challenge, especially if you choose to pass over CS and go in with 2 characters. There's a mechanic where lighting the gas clouds with the flint you find halfway through opens up or collapses passages, so previously explored areas become recontextualized with new paths. This dungeon is notable for being insanely brutal in the original SNES title. Astro Cave comes next, and doesn't feel like a full traditional dungeon, but I'm mentioning it anyway. This might be the game's shortest dungeon, but depending on how you've handled character recruitment, Faya will either accompany you or be totally absent, and if you've really been just denying everybody, she'll actually join you. But that is never the best route because she loses access to her late game skills, but whatever, the choice is there. This cave connects 2 towns together, and you can explore it from the Tatroy side and get an entirely different route. One route has Ornamine, and the other has a simple door puzzle. As far as dungeon mechanics go, all of this is really simple, but the 2 different routes give it a lot of character. The Purgatorium is the first visually engaging dungeon, and also potentially the weirdest this entry has to offer. Not only does entering the dungeon pose its own challenge because it's deceptive and dead ends immediately, the rooms are full of skill point drops and weird moving bouncy jelly things that teleport you around. Now I have no idea why these things are here, but hey, points for originality. Skill points on the floor? What is this, Minecraft? Guys, please stop. This is the last stop before the gameplay really begins to come together, and it's arguably the easiest of the dungeons, especially because you might have 4 party members.
Now, something notable with the first chunk of this game is that you've explored 3 dungeons, and all of them are skippable.
Staying at the inn for 20 nights allows you to skip the Pirate Cave. Ignoring the chests and alternate routing of the Astral Cave reduces that to a 2-minute affair, and the Purgatorium is straight up presented to you as a choice. Now, unless you're going for a very specific, strange type of playthrough, you shouldn't do this as it removes 3 party members from the pool and makes the game boring. But it's interesting that almost the entirety of the game prior to meeting up with Millie and Ronix, all the stuff leading up to the meat of the adventure, what are essentially inconvenient roadblocks, can be skipped or worked around. That's surprisingly realistic and fair. I wouldn't have blamed Roddick and Ilya for staying at the inn and taking a hit to their efficiency so they wouldn't have to go and die in a pirate's hideout. The player agency and control over the situation, presenting choices even if there's no real benefit, is something I greatly appreciate. Even though this becomes less emphasized once the real adventure begins, wins and it's time to go do the save the world junk, there are still a bunch of optional characters and dungeons. More so than any other game in the series, does First Departure feel like a choose-your-own adventure novel, like you could go and speak to another player who had a completely different experience. If only I knew people who have. I love that though. It's just about the one thing I believe this first entry does better than the second. This is the point in the story where you reach the final continent of Roke, and in line with what locals had to say about life there, monsters are way more deadly. This is tonally fitting as well, because around this time the story begins to pick up as the pieces start to fall into place. Mount Ekdar is the next dungeon, and this one is really only encouraged if you have Yoshua in your party. It tasks you with clearing out the mountain of monsters so the man who saved his life in the past can go and continue to hunt. All of the enemies are visible on screen here, which is kind of a neat change of pace. You're rewarded with a ridiculously strong weapon for Ronix if you complete it, so go nuts. It's good grinding for the next dungeon, because upon reaching Van Castle, you're told to go down in the dungeons to undergo a trial, giving the king an idea of your party's capabilities. Overall, it's a decent dungeon, not too long, but if you're underestimating the game, this is probably the first roadblock you'll encounter. It's tangibly more difficult than what came before, even if the boss, like most others in the early to mid-game, is a complete pushover. It has a brief door and lever puzzle, which I will admit confused me the first time I went through it. It has a clever use of visual cues, even if the answer is kind of spelled out for you. But whatever, I appreciate puzzles in any RPG. During your journey from castle to castle during the mid-game, you're tasked with clearing out monsters from the Portmouth Castle Treasury. This is easily one of the title's most funky dungeons. This treasury is flooded with insanely high-level enemies, and you need to go around and grab the OP gear from chests in order to survive. Now, you don't get to keep any of it once outside, so exploring it doesn't really yield much, but it is indeed fun to see those big numbers pop up, though you only get swords and rods for the magic users, meaning anyone other than Roddick, CS, and Ashley are kinda gonna be useless. It isn't long though, so if the quick deaths are annoying you, just run through. The boss isn't too hard provided Ronix has the big boom. I will say though, if you have Perichi, everything I just said is untrue. Explore the dungeon. Next is easily one of the best dungeons in First Departure. The Old Race Ruins is a weird chunk of video game. So this dungeon was indeed in the original Super Famicom version, but really only as a way to boot Mavel from your party if you felt so inclined. That's because Yoshua's sister, who joins in place of Mavel provided Yoshua and Ashley are around, was not a party member in the original, which kind of just leaves the Old Race Ruins feeling a little bit unnecessary. This is a First Departure video though, not the game, which I might play at some point. I don't know, I gotta finish my Daggerfall dungeon speedrun routing first. This is one of the most visually interesting dungeons, and among the most difficult to fight through and traverse. There are two paths to take, one to treasure and another to a little girl. More specifically, a little girl who can harness the power of a remake to cast spells from Star Ocean 2. Isn't she so neat? This one's top tier. After the Old Race Ruins, I took a ship back to Portmouth and for the first time found the abandoned Mount Maytork's mine. I've known about this optional dungeon for a long time, however I wasn't sure what I needed to do to access it. Turns out it's just hidden on the first screen of Mount Maytork's, and that kind of pushed me over the edge. There are some decent rewards here, alongside some solid levels before taking on the last act to pass Roke. It's pretty long, with a lot of twisty hallways and passages that loop back on themselves. The boss is named Jabberwabbit, Easy A. At this point, the game begins to pick up for its final act, so without spoiling anything in particular, all of the endgame dungeons are high tier. In regards to dungeon delving, this game consistently improves upon itself, which is honestly a super rare sight to see. No given dungeon feels redundant, as they all have some kind of special edge, something to make them feel distinct. This is the best example of First Departure's ability to keep itself feeling fresh, because despite some monotonous overworld retreading, there are no filler acts. Every story beat has a justification, every chunk of gameplay fresh in structure. It never feels like it's stagnating on its ideas. The best part is that once you've conquered the final dungeon, buddy boy, you ain't done. Get back up on that bunny. Brew some coffee. It's grind mother flippin' time. Upon completion, you unlock a new dungeon, alongside what is easily my favorite dev room I found in a game to date. Not elaborating on that second thing though. I beat the final boss with my party hovering around level 70, and you may think, well that seems right, 30 levels from the cap? Oh, it doesn't stop there. It doesn't even stop there. Star Ocean games cap their levels at 255, so that way the post-game can be far and away the most difficult content available. If you feel like trotting into the Cave of the 7 Stars after beating the big bad, your balls. Give them here. You'll need to be at least 110 to 120 before you even consider taking on the post-game. Now go ahead and call that an unnecessary grind. I call it one final casual filter. Grinding up to level off of the random encounters, man, you'll look like this. But if you know how to engage with the music creation, then you'll look like this. I'm not elaborating on any of that, by the way. Just know that if a part of this game feels unnecessarily player hostile, it's probably your fault. I'm not gaslighting you, you're just not good at the game. This is unfortunately not a value that is carried throughout the rest of the series, but whatever, rant for another day. As for the dungeon itself, it's 30 floors long, has some of the most offensively brutal enemy encounters I've ever seen in an old school action game, requires a lot of leveling or a bunch of tri-emblems, which at minimum cost 5 million full each.
Should my face be, like, feeling fuzzy right now?
I'm working on it right now, and honestly, I'm having a blast. It's really nice that a short game went out of its way to provide such an extensive, gameplay-focused endgame. I feel like I'm learning how the systems work inside and out, even finding certain intricacies within the simple core combat, like canceling your attacks to boost your chance to block. Even when the game ends, you're far from done, and that is thankfully one thing that does get carried throughout the rest of the series. I might talk about endgame content later down the line, though. In short, if you're masochistic, play this endgame. You'll love it. And if you're suicidal, I genuinely wish the best for you. I appreciate your watching this video, really. You mean the world to so many people, even if your head is lying to you and saying otherwise. Heck, go play Klonoa. Or better yet, watch my video on Klonoa. It's such a good video. Why did nobody watch it?
Time for a coffee break. Are you having fun? Any particular aspect of my commentary catch your attention? Sound off in the comments. The sound of the beautiful caffeine hallucination-induced orchestra. God, I love this song. Dig that gong and slap bass duo right there.
Alright, let's take a step back for a moment and look at what we have here. A remake of a retro JRPG that can now be considered retro itself, with simple but entertaining mechanics on the surface that are supplemented by a ton of intelligently placed optional mechanics and player choice to engage with. It's a deceptively deep experience, one that's confident and sneaky enough to hide some of its best content for the devoted to find, which in turn makes its rewards all that more sweet. It's a rare example of a JRPG that gets better with every subsequent playthrough, because not only is there mechanical depth to discover, there's extra content, different party makeups that lead to slightly altered story segments and cutscenes. And unlike many other games like the modern Zelda duology, Golden Sun, mainline Pokemon, the times when you're presented with a dialogue choice actually feel meaningful, because they are. Choosing one answer over another can lead to tangible changes in the conversation or party makeup. Rarely does the game veil this any other way than thinly, but that pressure to really think out the choice you want to make is really nice. First Departure is a game that presents subsystems with intent, with deliberacy, with the expectation that the player will use them, not afraid to punish those who think they're above taking the gifts offered.
That is precisely why this series gets a lot of doo-doo tossed around its driveway. Let's break it down real quick.
I've seen a lot of complaints tossed at First Departure over the years, some of which I do absolutely agree with. AI is very dumb, no defending that. The story feels like it's rushing from point A to point B at times, with character exchanges being awkwardly brief or points of conversation being quickly discarded. After a certain point in the story, optional party members rarely chime into conversations, and when they do, it's never more than flavor text, generally contributing very little to the conversation, pushing it no further. Since characters can join so quickly and without hesitation, some of them barely get anything in the way of meaningful dialogue. I definitely am not a fan of the world map. It's laid out in a really strange, linear manner, which I can only imagine is a result of the original game not having one to begin with, instead presenting you with Secret of Mana-esque routes in between areas. This means that the world you explore is fairly under-designed in comparison to the original game, and honestly, is just really ugly in general. The game has a very odd point of no return, which makes sense in context to the story, but like, wasn't present in the SNES original? This game, much like any other Tri-Ace RPG, has quite a few rough edges when it comes to quality of life, but I find that despite the title's shortcomings, the core experience is enjoyable, and when all of the subsystems are taken advantage of, it's heightened further and blossoms over the course of its runtime into a truly unique and memorable game. However, much like any other Tri-Ace RPG, those complaints aimed towards the lack of quality of life and its minor issues are so overblown, it's laughable, primarily because people just don't know how to play them properly. Listen, I entirely understand if this game isn't your cup of tea. I personally enjoy the simple, punchy combat and retro JRPG design philosophies of having to individually level up characters and stopping at certain points to grind. All of those extra layers of depth present from the player choice, distinct dungeons, and item creation that make me love the game won't do anything for you if you don't jive with the simple mechanics. But please, for the love of God, don't go online and complain about problems that only exist because you aren't playing the game properly. I've seen a lot of people in online discussions claim hideous difficulty spikes, and then you press for questions only to learn they're woefully underleveled or haven't engaged with the skill systems properly. Subsystems in games are there for a reason. Shocker. And if you write them off as superfluous inclusions and ignore them only to complain about the game being too difficult or not understanding what you're doing wrong, I have a simple answer for you. Open the menu. Actually utilize the skills at your disposal. First Departure begins to throw a lot of status effects at you near the endgame to add an extra level of threat to the encounters. If your party gets stoned, you die. You're done. Dunzo. Use the jewelry crafting to make status resistant pendants instead of just giving up. I once saw a guy claim he dropped the game because of the point of no return and that it's not fair if you're underleveled. You can grind. After that point, I swear, there's a shop that sells everything you need for recovery and item creation. Go and figure it out. Grinding does not take very long, alright? You level up fast, and there are tons of skills to make it way faster. The game's hard, it's brutal, but unlike many of its lesser contemporaries, it expects you to engage with everything it makes available to you. This was my easiest playthrough yet, because I did just that. I made my own success. What's more satisfying, alright? Having a smooth ride, or a bumpy ride that teaches you something? Huh? First Departure is the Chad Bojack in this situation, alright? Choose wisely. You don't play game because you can't win, but you can't win because you don't play game.
If I didn't bite my fingernails, I'd claw my fingernails into my skull. But I can't, because I bite my fingernails. Just cook the damn parfait!
I'm the kind of person who wants a game to make me work for success. I find massive enjoyment in the handful of Souls games I've played. I like that First Departure is at its best when you dive in head first. The more you dig in and the more you explore and learn to utilize item creation, music, exploration, and choosing your route through gameplay segments, the more you play, the better it gets. While yes, on the surface, First Departure is a simple game that is dated by modern standards, when you play to its strengths, you get a dang good experience. This idea permeates the whole series, really. It's one that almost feels tailor-made to repel those who aren't well suited in the JRPG genre, attracting those who are well aware of its baggage, quirks, and love the landscape for them. It's one of those franchises that exists outside of the forgotten cult scene, but by no means thriving in the mainstream. In fact, it never could. The Divine Force reviewed fairly mediocre, and in all honesty, many complaints directed towards it are things I found a lot of enjoyment in. That's just how it is.
That's what it do, Yugi! In First Departure's case, it took me a long time to articulate exactly why I love the game, and turns out all it took was an honest playthrough, not constantly comparing it to its successor. I love it because it's a game that keeps on giving, keeps impressing, and providing more each time I go back to it. In every facet of its design, it scratches that itch. You know the one. The one only a specific experience, one that feels tailor-made to your personal preferences can scratch. Or maybe I'm just deeply sick. It's nice to have that over and done with. Five games left to go.